Hello, friends, and welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. My name is Scott Cowan, and I'm the host of the show. Each episode, I have a conversation with an interesting guest who is living in or from Washington State. These are casual conversations with real and interesting people. I think you're going to like the show. So let's jump right in with today's guest. Well, I'm sitting here with Neil and Tamara Caulkins. You guys have an upcoming concert that I was approached, and I'm going to turn it over to you. You're a classical guitar duo. How did you get involved with this Dry Falls project? We'll call it the Dry Falls project. This is probably wrong. But on May 20th, you're going to be performing a brand new work written by Martin Kennedy. How did this come about?
Okay. We have a classical guitar series here in Ellensburg called Guitar in the Gallery in conjunction with Gallery 1. That's the location where we do the performances. And we were wanting to have a second performance venue for our folks who were coming over. The Guitar in the Gallery series is on Sunday afternoon. And so we thought, where could we have folks play on a Saturday? And so we happened to be in Soap Lake at one point. It was our wedding anniversary. We went there, and I was walking around town, and there was a gallery. It's called Fire on Main. It's a blown glass gallery, and one of the doors was open to what turns out to be the hot shop, which is where they have the furnace, and the person actually does the glass blowing. And there she was, and there, Debbie Noah, blowing glass. And I stood there in the door, and we began chatting. And I presented the idea of perhaps having our gallery series there in her blown glass gallery, also like have it on Saturday evenings. And that sounded great. And so we began doing that. We did that for a couple of years. And at one point, Tammy and we premiered a piece there. It was written for us by Virginia Yep. And we premiered it there. And after the performance, the mayor of Soap Lake, who is one of the big supporters of the series, Mr. Gravel, I believe, and he came up to us and he said, we need to get a composer, to commission a composer to write not the Grand Canyon Suite, but the Grand Coulee Suite. And I thought about that. Dang, that is a good idea. Because I've always loved that area of the state. I'm from Eastern Washington, and I have always thought that the Dry Falls area is one of the most stunning parts of the state. The rock formations are so dramatic, and the history is fascinating. It's a magic place. And so Tammy and I talked about that, and we wanted a composer from here to write the piece. Martin Kennedy was teaching. He was teaching composition here at Central in Ellensburg. And so we, along with the Friends of the Lower Grand Coulee, commissioned him to write this piece, a musical evocation of the Dry Falls. And Martin is also a cyclist, like Tammy and I are. And so during the pandemic, so that Martin could see the area better, we went there, we cycled through it. And so he could see it and learn about the history of it, the relationship of it to the Missoula flood, et cetera, et cetera. And so he, as I said, we had commissioned it in conjunction with the Friends of the Lower Grand Coulee, and so that's how it came to be. It was inspired by this comment that the then mayor of Soap Lake made to us after another premiere.
And the Grand Canyon Suite is a very famous American piece for symphony. And Neil was born in Moses Lake, loves Eastern Washington. It made a lot of sense to write a piece about that fantastic part of the country.
So you're going to perform this for the first time on May 20th in Soap Lake.
Correct. Okay. The performance will be at the Lakeside Bistro, and we will be premiering. It's a movement. It's a piece in 6 movements, and the movements are, there's a prelude, then there's the central movements are like a Baroque dance suite, really. You have an allemande, a courant, a chaconne, and a jig, and then there's a postlude. And each of the movements has this very poetic subtitle, which has some reference to the Missoula flood. It's really quite lovely.
So the Missoula flood was 15,000 years ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, right. When the waters came through and just kind of scoured the landscape and
Right.
left what is the Grand Coulee.
So,
Do you want to know how we got into guitar? Actually,
but we're gonna get there.
Well,
okay.
Because I'm gonna tie this back early on when we started the podcast. Nick Zentner from Central was a guest, and Nick. It was a very interesting conversation for me. It was very different than what we do now in the sense of I didn't have a conversation with him before. Literally, he popped on screen and 30 seconds later he goes, "Hit record, let's go." And it was like, okay, I'm going to hang on. And it was like, I was trying to ride a bull for 8 seconds in a rodeo. He was great, but he's talking about this and he's talking about, dry falls, and he's talking about the enchantments, and he's talking about rocks in this general region, which I've never really paid attention to them. Right. Mm-hmm. And so he said some things that were fascinating to me, and I still now even go back and go, oh yeah, the enchantments, how the rock moved from what's Baja California now is through the millions of years it's moved, which was really, like, really, I think of rocks as being from where they are and never think of them moving. So he's talking about the Missoula floods and all this stuff, and now you guys are involved with this Dry Falls piece. What I'd like to know is, I'm not a musician and I'm not well versed in this genre of music. So you said some words a little while ago that I can't even pronounce, that I didn't understand. Jig, I got that one. The others I'm not sure about. But what I'd like to know, so what's involved with commissioning a piece? Because did you have input in the actual writing of the piece, or was this just Mr. Kennedy's work, or how can you set that table?
Yeah, I think for this piece, we just took him out to that landscape and said, write something that's like this. And came up with an amazing piece that, it's just, you can really hear kind of the pounding water, and you can hear the spaciousness. So the way that he has put the notes together and the rhythms, it's very maybe different than what most people listen to, which is very regular. Mm-hmm. This is very, I wouldn't say it's atonal, but it's certainly not the kind of, I don't know if you played like blues, you have the 4-1-5 chords. So it's not really like that. It's much more involved and I don't know, very interesting. And I can say something about the Baroque Dance Suite because I've done some historic dance.
Okay.
This was a format that, they used kind of like the blues, I guess. You have certain kinds of dances that you do to certain rhythms and tempos. And so he's interpreted that very loosely.
Okay.
But
so you literally you guys rode around out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the framework that you provided him.
Yeah.
Make
to get
something
him to
sound like this looks.
Yeah.
Bingo. Yes. How can you musically evoke this landscape? And a part of it is the history of this landscape. And so like the beginning, the first movement, the prelude, its subtitle is "A Thaw Falls Upon the Earth." And so you have these little notes. Ba-ti, 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 pom, ba-ti, ba-ti. And you can just imagine, not random, but drips. Drips are not random, but they have a rhythm to them. But it's not a rhythm like what I'm snapping out here. And you hear that. Other parts, you will hear these echoes between the parts where it's as though it reminds me of being in a cave where there's a drop of water. You hear it hit the surface of the water. Then you hear these echoes at odd rhythms from it. And then as Tammy said, there are these very driving, heavy parts of it where you can imagine a real deluge happening.
So the sense that you're small in this immense event over an immense amount of time, I think it's really a great kind of perspective to put yourself in. Put yourself into this, present over the long durée, as we say, a long time period.
This was written intentionally for two guitars.
Yeah.
So it's not an orchestral piece. So he's accomplishing this by only using two instruments.
Correct. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
We don't play transcriptions. We only play music written for guitar.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So to me, that seems it would be even more challenging when you have just two instruments to work with. From a you can't let's have the bassoon come in here. You've got two guitars, and with the limits of what those instruments can do.
I think that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was it like? So I've got this imagination going. You wrote out there, you said, give us something musically that looks like this, sounds like this. And then he comes back to you and hands it to you, which I know is probably not accurate, but we're going to run with that story.
That's pretty much
that is accurate.
Okay.
That is accurate.
Okay.
And so when we were out there, we said, here's what it looks like. And here's something we know of the history of it. I'm sure Mr. Zentner could have speak much more at length and more authoritatively than I can. But it's kind of one of the things that you see in the piece is, let's call it the difference between how the Dry Falls area was formed and how the Grand Canyon was formed. The Grand Canyon was, my understanding is, it's millions of years of the Colorado River scouring this out. Not so with the Dry Falls. The Dry Falls was created very quickly and very violently. Okay, and so there is a sense of I could go so far as say violence in some of the movements.
Okay, so so you would characterize it then as having an aggressive, violent tone to it, I guess.
Particularly one of the movements, the jig, really is. Yeah, it's. Okay.
It's like
it's
1, 2, 3, 4,
driving.
5, 6, 7. It's in 7, and it's very erratic.
G, bon, G, bon, G, bon, G, bon. I mean, it's like it's pretty heavy.
Okay. So he brings you the music. How do I want to say that? So when I ask an author, what was it like the first time you saw your book in public? And you haven't performed this in public yet, so I can't ask you what it's like the first time you performed it in public. But walk me through when he handed you the sheet music. Did he try to play it for you, or did you sit down and start playing it? How did you go about hearing it for the first time?
When he sent it to us, I think he did send a synthesizer version of it, where you get a machine to play it. We really focus on just reading the music and discerning what's said here on the page. That's obviously a very modernist statement, but sorry, I'm a modernist.
So what was your reaction then? When you first saw it?
I think it's very when we first started playing through it. Yeah, I think it's quite clear what he's getting at musically. It's we had some
So was it? I guess I don't want to say this. So you're the performer. You didn't write this.
Correct.
Okay. So as it's given to you for the first time to play, what was that experience like for you? Because when I talk to musicians that are writing their own songs, they're, in my interpretation, they're noodling around, jotting something down on paper, strumming something, keyboard, drums, and they're piecing it together. And then all of a sudden they get to this point. But in your case, he handed you the sheets of music. And you're in my view, which is not a musician's view, please. You're reading somebody's work for the first time.
Right.
Okay, that you're going to be the performer of. What was it like when you first played some of those notes on the guitar?
Well, you're sorting out what is the composer's intent? What is the composer trying to say? How does this musically need? What speed does this musically need to go at? How does this places where you pause? How is this musically supposed to hang together? Sort of step back a moment. In many ways, the entire training of a classical musician, at least it's not wrong to think of it this way, is to teach them to do what you just said. You get a piece of music, and with whatever minimal other indications there are, piano here, there's some, a retard mentioned here. With these minimal indications, you figure out how to make it into music.
Okay,
that's what the entire training of a classical musician is, or at least it's not wrong to characterize it as that. It's more than that, but and so this is, in many ways, this is what we're trained to do, is to get this, and we do that both with music that is written for us. We figure out what the composer's saying, and you can hear it. You can understand the aesthetic of it and how to get at that. And with music that has been written for us by living composers, and it's the same thing that we do when we are playing our historic instruments, playing 19th century music. We don't play the standard repertoire that others, but we just don't have an interest in that, or at least we're more interested, I am, in playing stuff that folks haven't heard before, because there are plenty of fine recordings of thus and such duet by Fernando Sor. Okay, great. I'm interested in playing something else. And so again, there I'm getting just a piece of paper from an archive, probably. And in that case, I don't have a composer to ask, hey, what you mean on measure 97? Because he's dead. And so it is totally up to us to figure out what that means. So it's the same thing here.
So did you go back and ask, what did you mean on this? No,
we haven't asked him on any.
No.
It's pretty clear.
Yeah, it's
clear.
Totally
and it
clear.
fits under the fingers pretty well.
Yeah.
I would even say some of it's very guitaristic. He's got some chords that just really resonate. It's very playable.
Very playable. Okay. And how long? So once again, we'll go back. You guys were riding bikes. He goes out there. You tell him this is what you want. How long did it take for him to hand you what I'm looking at on the table right now?
Right. My recollection was that once he got started writing it, I think it was fairly quick. Okay. But I just really don't remember, because it was the pandemic.
What year it was or anything.
It could have been 3 years. Yeah. It could have been 3 minutes, 3 years. We don't know.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I don't think it took him more than a few months, a couple months to write it. He was writing a a big symphonic piece. I want to say a trombone concerto. And so that was taking a ton of his time. And so once he got done with that, then I think he whipped this out fairly quickly.
Okay.
He was
parts than a concerto.
He was very happy to have us a small, more manageable project to work on.
In the grand scheme of things, then for him, this is a smaller project.
Yes.
Scope. Okay.
Yes.
Only 2 parts.
So
Yes.
how long have you had the music?
Ooh.
Well, I can say like Robin Ford played this. He's the blues player, and he did a concerto in Germany. And he's like, "Yeah, I was in my hotel room for 3 whole days." And we're like, yeah, we usually take at least 3 months.
Okay. 3 days. 3 days. Like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's a different kind of process, right? Like he's playing blues, which has this certain structure and certain chords that you see all the time. This is very different in that it's even different than traditional harmonies. Mm-hmm. So you might have, like I'm playing G sharp, D sharp, G sharp, D sharp. And then it goes to, no, that's not a good example, but say a chord that's like A sharp, F sharp, C sharp. It's not a chord that you're going to play all the time. It's going to sound new to your ears.
Right.
And we really like just playing something that's new. You don't go to back to the record and play it like, see how other people have been playing it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fun.
So on the 20th, and what if somebody that's listening to this were to attend?
Yeah.
What can they expect?
So we're playing 3 pieces.
Okay.
One of them is an early 19th century piece that hasn't been heard in a very long time. It's very traditional. I think it's by Antonio de Abreu. So that means he's kind of noble. It's like if you have D-E before your last name, that means you're...
All right.
Somos you're gente, you're gentleman.
Okay.
So that's a piece that we put together. Somebody had been maybe drinking wine or something, so there were parts of the manuscript that were missing. So we reconstructed that, and it's got this da-dum bum bum bum. This kind of sounds like they're off on a hunt. And then, there's very hauntingly beautiful second movement. And then it finishes with a minuet.
But you tell me though, were there sections missing of this?
Yes. Well, they weren't missing; they were obliterated by a spill, and so there are sections of our parts which have these. It's like somebody dumped red wine on it, and so you can't really read what the measure is.
Wine?
Right, exactly. And so
we've reconstructed it.
And again, it's a piece of what one learns when one's learning to be a musician. I mean, you can look at it and you can through the stain, you can make out some shapes. And so you can get some idea, and the shapes are reminiscent of the shapes that have happened in the measure before, which you can read. And so you can say, okay, it's probably something like this with that rhythm. And then we try it out and we say, okay, that's close, and you just keep doing it until you get, oh, yep, that one's like it. Got it. Bingo.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. So that's one piece.
That's one piece.
Okay.
Exactly right.
Open with that.
And then I don't remember the order of
we're doing the Abreu and then Michael Young.
Oh, good.
His piece is next. We were at a friend's wedding at St. Mark's. They had the big, fantastic organ there. And we're like...
In Seattle,
right. And we're like, oh, that's such a great sound. Wouldn't it be cool to have a piece that was like big organ music?
Okay.
A lot of gravity.
That? Michael Young.
Yes.
He's an organist who loves to take off when people are singing their hymns, and all of a sudden there'll be lots of different notes that you're not expecting. He has a lot of fun with it.
Wonderful improviser.
Wonderful with improvisation. So he's written this piece. This was written for us Well, it was right after Rebecca's wedding. So, he was like, I woke up and I had this idea. And we're like, oh, that's so cool.
And
so that's the second piece.
And we asked him, this is a fun story, at least I think. So we had asked Mr. Young to write this piece for us. He did 3 movements, called prelude music. It's a prelude,
fugue.
A fugue.
So fugue is like you have like dum bum, and then another part goes dum bum, and it kind of like overlaps. Right.
Okay. So it's a prelude, a fugue, and then a passacaglia. And so we premiered the piece, 3 movements. And so we premiered the piece at a performance for the Seattle Guitar Society about a year ago, I guess. Yeah, it was a year ago, in the spring of last year. And upon listening to it, Mr. Young said, it just can't end that way. It needs more. It needs more. So within a few weeks, we had a 4th movement, the toccata. And so he wrote the toccata. So we will be playing all 4 movements, the 4th movement being a premiere also. Okay. So we're going to be premiering the toccata, the last movement. And then we'll premiere Martin's piece.
All right. Okay, going to set the stage for the audience. The audience doesn't get to see anything here. So I'm sitting in your living room, and I'm looking over your shoulder, and I see a guitar. And I can't stop wondering what is attached to the guitar and why.
There's a
Sorry. You see 2 guitars. One of them has a brace.
I don't see the other one. So is it a brace? Okay, I'm looking at that going, and what is that for?
There is a device that screws on to the bottom of the guitar, which puts it at the proper height and angle such that the guitar can be resting there on one's left leg. Oh. And it's this sort of gymnastic device, but it works fine. And the advantage of that is that the traditional way of playing the classical guitar, the modern classical guitar, everyone follows Segovia. I shouldn't blame Segovia. Targa did it too. But you would have a footstool under your left foot, elevating the left leg, and that would get the guitar up in the proper position. The downside of that is it's not the best thing for your back. And so this odd looking device that you're seeing is a way of getting the guitar in the same position, but
easier on your back.
Easier on your back, exactly right.
Why you've referenced the position of the guitar. Why is that important? Does it change the sound?
We're playing a lot of different notes. So to be able to reach all of them, you want to have really good posture, and you want to, for ease of playing.
Yeah.
We're not just playing chords.
Okay. Yeah. You want to have the guitar because we are doing so much, and we want to be in control of our sound. Mm-hmm. And so we want to, not be strangely taxing on our backs such that we, cuts short our playing. We want to have the guitar as stable as possible.
Okay.
And so you want the guitar to theoretically kind of not move, such that you can, if you do something subtly different, which one does with usually the right hand, it's because you're wanting a different sound. So you want the guitar in one place and you to be able to subtly change the angle that your fingernail strikes the string to get that subtly different sound that you're after. It's all about having the guitar in a stable position.
So by stabilizing the guitar, that removes that variable of you're moving your fingers. That's the variable. We don't want the guitar to move and mess up what you're trying to subtly do. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah, we're playing pretty special instruments. These were built by Greg Miller, who's coming to the concert to hear his 2 instruments play together. We have a spruce top and a cedar top. Yeah, he's really great.
Yeah, they're marvelous
They're very
instruments.
resonant.
They were both custom made for us. Greg lives in Portland.
Oh, so when you say custom made, what's custom? Is it fitted for you like a pair of shoes? Is it custom?
No, it's a traditional size.
Okay.
It's not you can get them at a different scale, which is a different string length. We didn't. Went with the normal 650 string length. And everything else about that is the build itself. There are certain things that one does pick. They're internal. You can't see them. There's a thing about the bracing which is an upgrade, and yes, I did want that. But when we say custom, what we're in many ways, well, one of the things that it involves is going there and actually picking out the woods. Okay. That's really fun. It is to go into the shop and actually pick out which piece is going to be the top. Here are two or three possibles.
The most important. We'll sit and tap them and just kind of try to get a sense of what they will sound like.
Yeah, and picking out which pieces of wood are going to be the back and sides, and then he would send via email various different design possibilities for the rosette, and
that's the circle around the sound hole,
and the rosette on my guitar, which is the darker topped one, it looks like the rosette looks like this kind of it is this repeating geometric pattern, but what it is it's inspired by a kimono folded and being in the closet. It's really astounding.
I'm kidding. I can totally get that from here. Where did you get the inspiration for that?
I didn't. He did.
Okay, so that's. I'll be honest with you. That seems like a very, very cool, but sort of like.
Yeah,
I've not thought of something like this before.
We have some contact with Japan. Tammy went to kindergarten and first grade there.
Okay, so you do have. There's some.
And our daughter lived there for a couple of years.
Okay, well, we can work with that. We'll pull on that thread.
But Greg's eye for design is just second to none. He is just stunning.
Now you mentioned, and I know next to nothing about guitars. You mentioned the bracing in yours is you said, and you wanted it.
Yeah.
Why?
There's a special sort of bracing in the inside, which that's redundant, all the bracings on the inside, but that allows the top to vibrate more freely. Oh. And so as you look at a guitar, you don't know it, but on the inside there are a set of, I want to say there are 7. They're called fan struts. They're on the inside of the guitar. There are also these lateral braces. And so the special bracing that we ask for, we have it on both, is that this lateral bracing, it's cut such that it basically creates a bridge over the fan struts. And so it is not impinging the vibration of the fan struts. So it allows the idea is my understanding, my layman's understanding is that it allows the entirety of the top to resonate better. But
and that's a lot of what we're doing with classical guitar that you would not get as much in an electric guitar, is we're really thinking about, different kinds of sounds. How do we get the instrument to be, it's never a loud instrument, but get some dynamic range, get some tonal colors.
So these are acoustics. Do you use? So when you're performing, let's talk about on the 20th. Will it simply be acoustic, or will there be there? So there won't be any amplification.
Nope.
I don't believe so. Yeah. No.
Okay. We actually went up to the space, and it's pretty good.
The acoustics are fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. Here at Gallery 1, we play upstairs in the atrium, and it's super loud, super resonant. So that's exciting. But I think the Bistro is going to be great. They just renovated it, and
So if you were going to amplify this, how does one amplify an acoustic?
Or not.
But if you when you're recording it, how are you? Let's say if you're recording something,
Yeah.
How do you go about? How does one record your performance?
Sure. The way is same as we're recording here with microphones out in front of the instrument.
Okay.
And you place those. We've done it different ways. If you place the microphone in close to the instrument, then it's not surprisingly, I suppose, when I say it out loud, you're really hearing the instrument a lot. By contrast, if you put the microphone 6 feet back, then you're hearing the instrument and the reverberation of the instrument in the room.
Okay.
And so it's a balancing of that, that kind of thing.
So the room would color the
Absolutely.
recording. So if you were
Yep.
sitting over here, so we're in a rectangular room. If you were sitting down where your music stands are, and I were to be recording you, and I had a microphone, say 6 feet away, the room is going to color the sound as well, or be part of the color. Whereas if I put the microphones up close to you, we're really just getting less of the room and more focused on just the sound coming out of the instrument versus the environment.
I think that's correct.
Okay. All right. One of the things I like about this show is I always just get to ask questions that are probably like super basic, but that's okay. They're my questions. What are some of the differences between a classical guitar and a normal, not normal, mainstream acoustic guitar? Like if I found a Martin guitar at Goodwill, that's a brand I'm aware of, which I believe are good guitars.
Oh, very. Okay. Yeah.
So if I found a Martin guitar, I wouldn't recognize that. Like if this, please forgive me for saying if this guitar was at Goodwill. I mean, no disrespect. But if that guitar was at Goodwill in a case, I opened the case, I went, yeah, I don't recognize the name. And I closed the case and move on. Probably a mistake. But if it had Martin across the headstock, I'd go, oh, it's a Martin, or think so. What's the inherent difference in, say, a Martin acoustic versus this guitar?
Okay.
I mean, for playing.
Probably the strings. I mean, Martins usually have steel strings on them.
Okay, so these are nylon?
These are nylon.
These are nylon
we
string.
actually use gut on our early 19th century instruments.
Mm-hmm.
So the nylon, gives you a lot more different tonal color.
Now, when you say early 19th century instruments, do you mean you're playing actual physical instruments from the 19th century, or?
We have both.
Okay.
We have original, like Tammy has a 19th century guitar that was made in 1820 in Méricourt, France, and I have one from Stuttgart, Germany that was built in 1850. And we play those, and we also have lovely replica instruments. One is built, modeled after an 1840 French instrument, and the other is it has 7 strings, and the other is a terz guitar, so it's a little smaller and higher pitch and loud, and it's modeled after I want to say an 1850 Stouffer, a German model from, I believe, Vienna. Anyway, those were both built for us by a builder in Victoria, British Columbia named Scott Tremblay. We have a pair. So we have both originals and replicas. But getting back to your question about the instrument itself, I guess if you, at a Goodwill, you open it up and here's a classical guitar, you don't know if it's good or bad. You play it and you just see that would be the thing you would do at first to determine, does it have the volume, the color, the range of color, does it really speak? Those would be sorts of questions you would play. Additionally, you would look at it to see, does it have a solid wood top or does it have a plywood top?
That's a mark of a student instrument.
Yeah. And
to be fair, there was a Hauser, which he was a very famous maker in the early 20th century, that was painted blue, that somebody found at a Goodwill or someplace. And very good guitar.
Okay.
Yeah, one can find exceptional instruments in pawn shops. It happens.
It does. I could tell you stories about Goodwill because I used to work for them in their online sales department. So you'd be amazed what comes through a Goodwill network. So now this is the rabbit hole. So you have these 19th century instruments that are almost 200 years old.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you're comfortable playing these. I would be afraid that I would unintentionally damage it or something. I mean,
there were a lot of them built. So
but
for a long time, they weren't really even valued. I mean, people were like, oh, early 19th century music, whatever. But yeah, they're
so if you
super
will,
fun.
pick one of you. Compare and contrast the 19th century original that you have with these new custom guitars over here. Do they play dramatically differently?
Not dramatically, but the early 19th century instrument it has a lighter sound. It's not as loud. It's a little bit smaller, which I like because I like to stand when I'm playing. And
is the sound different because you're playing gut strings versus nylon strings?
That's a piece of it.
That's
yes.
a piece of it. Yeah.
It's also this bracing business that I went into, which was probably too detailed, but the bracing the interior bracing of a 19th century guitar is significantly different. You don't have those fan struts I talked about. All you have are the lateral braces. The woods are different too. Whereas the modern guitar follows the Spanish tradition, the Torres tradition. They're always usually spruce or cedar top, and they have some sort of a rosewood back and sides. The 19th century guitars were pretty consistently spruce tops with maple back and sides. So in other words, the woods were the same as a member of the violin family.
And the maple makes a difference because it's not as, would you say, warm? It's got this very lively, bright sound. And the early 19th century guitar was an instrument that was built for the parlor. So it doesn't need to be reach to, seat 100.
Right.
So, it's a very nice sound. The music that you play on it also, I don't know how to just...
Yeah, it sits on it better.
It just sits on it really nicely, and you can hear all the different voices.
Yeah, it's really nice. And back to your question of the sense of, or I was sensing a sense of anxiety or whatever about using the 19th century guitars in just making use of them again. It's with both of our instruments, the originals, we've had them looked at by folks to make sure that nothing's loose, everything's glued down, everything is sound, and all of that sort of thing. And we've had anyway. So we're quite confident that they're perfectly together. Solid sound instruments, and you don't put the real high tension modern strings on them.
Okay.
You think about what strings you're putting on them, and we also tune them. We don't tune them all the way up to 440. We tune them at 430, which folks say is probably more what A was back then.
Okay.
So they're not tuned as they don't have quite the string tension on them but
I would be, my apprehension about the device would be inadvertently dropping it. Not that the instrument shouldn't be played. I think it's wonderful that they're being played. I would be more concerned about my myself, like
putting.
Okay, we won't let you play.
Yeah, do not, because if you would like your instruments to go out of tune, let me get within 2 feet of them, and it will happen. No, I would just be like, if I had an instrument of that age, I would be worried that somehow between getting it out of my vehicle and playing it on stage, I would do something to it that would cause me great distress, like drop it or something. That would be my.
We're pretty careful.
I'm sure you are, but no, that would be. But see, that would be where I would be. My anxiety would just be profound, and it wouldn't be fun for me. I actually think it's amazing that you're playing instruments of that era, and that they are still being used. Because when I think of, like, we'll just say Stradivarius. I mean, those are
lots of violins that are that older being played
right,
all the
exactly,
time.
and
yeah.
so, but they're also being cared for. But these are wood, and so how does one ensure that after all these years that the wood is still not dried? Maybe dried out's not the right way, but what does one do to care for an instrument like of any of these instruments?
Right, exactly right. Yeah, there are numerous humidifying devices or regimes that folks use. We use this. I think Diodario makes it now. These
little packets.
They're
humidor,
packets. They're
something, and we have special cases that are, air proof, I guess.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, they're
yeah.
Dare I say, like, museum grade? If
fairly sealed case, and there are these humidity packs that you put inside to keep and we do that particularly certain times of the year here in Central Washington. Of course, we want to do it in the summer when it gets real dry, and in the middle of the winter. When it's very cold, it also gets really, really dry. Right, so those are the 2 times we're most concerned about it.
Okay. We're going to do this episode a little differently. So let's go back to the event on the 20th. What haven't we talked about that we should have about that? What should the public know? No, most of my episodes, I like to think of them as being evergreen. So there's a component to this. If you're listening after May 20th, the event's already happened, but a lot of this conversation is still valid. But on the 20th, what else can the public expect, and what didn't I ask you?
There will be wine, Washington wine.
Okay.
Afterwards. Washington
wine afterwards. All right. She says with a big smile on her face, just to give you that perspective.
We're very much looking forward to premiering the piece, and we're very thankful of the commissioning role that the Friends of the Lower Grand Coulee have played in this, and they've been the ones who have been instrumental in arranging this new venue and the many things about the event itself. So,
well, let's talk about the Friends of the Lower Grand Coulee for a second. Can you give me a little bit more insight than what I know? They're friends. That's what I know.
They're just promoting education, creativity, just
for this region,
the lower part of the Grand Coulee. I don't know much about beyond that.
We'll get them on so they can speak to it.
Yeah,
we'll have them on as another guest sometime. So we're gonna now. I'd like to know more about you two specifically. Yeah. How did you two end up playing classical guitar? How'd you end up here in Ellensburg playing classical guitar?
Well, I went to college as a pre-med major.
Pre-med, okay.
And I was playing ragtime guitar. And I got a scholarship. We had our teacher there he had decided he was tired of New York and had moved out to Idaho, and he drove in every week to teach us. And it was really great at exposing us to. I went to a Segovia master class. Julian Breen, kind of David Russell, Manuel Barreco, all the great
Jose Tomas.
So master classes, and I guess for me, part of it was just the physics of the sound. When you hear a note, it's not just one note. There's the fundamental, and then the octave above it is also sounding at the same time. So sound is actually three-dimensional. So I guess that also ties into my interest in history of science.
Okay. All right.
But classical guitar.
Yeah. So we met in college at Whitworth. And as Tammy said, we were studying with this teacher who had come from New York. He had been a student of Segovia. And so early on, we had, from both the master classes we had gone to and studying with that teacher, we early on had the idea that once we finished our master's degrees, which we did later in North Carolina, that we would go and study in Spain. And so we did our master's degrees in music in North Carolina, and then went to the Royal Conservatory of Music in Madrid and studied with Jose Luis Rodrigo for a little over a year, and then came back to the U.S. and we were still living in North Carolina, and we toured around the largely the southeast and eastern seaboard, and then out here in the Northwest when we come back to visit family, and did that for 7 years, and then eventually through
moved back to be closer to family.
Closer to family, get day jobs, etc., and find ourselves here we've been here in Ellensburg for about almost 18 years now.
Okay. So why Ellensburg? What was, closer to family, but what was it? Did it have anything to do with the college, or?
No, it was me getting the job at the prosecutor's office.
Okay.
And so came here for work.
Okay.
So yeah,
I did my master's here.
You did your master's at Central?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In history.
Okay.
The second master's.
Second master's.
So let's talk about Ellensburg for a little bit. I went to college here, like I said, and anybody listening to this, I say it pretty much every episode. What do you like about this area?
The music department's fantastic. There's such great musicians here. Okay. And the kids are pretty good too. They come and, they have a lot of time to practice. It's not a big city with a ton of stuff going on. Concerts are fantastic.
Yeah, we love the being able to go to the recitals at Central, and also we've really enjoyed the opportunity to do recitals with the music faculty at Central, which we've done for numerous years, playing chamber music with the different some of the different faculty members in the music department. That's been great.
Hal Ott has a flute. He's the flute faculty, and it only plays at 4:30, and we were telling you about, or maybe is it 4:15?
It's a little different. It's like 4:32 or something. It's very odd. Play
it in the orchestra because you can't tune it up to A 440. It's like I'm not.
I have a blank look on my face.
So like A has not always been A.
Okay.
Right? So it really depended on what town, what the organ was tuned like.
Oh, okay.
So you would tune to the organ basically.
Okay.
So his flute can play with guitar because we can, play our early 19th century guitars. We can just tune it down.
We can
slightly.
put A wherever we want to.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's been fun.
It's this marvelous instrument that he has. I want to say the date. There's a date written on it, and I can't remember what it is, but
1815.
Wow. Oh, it was 1815?
So, yeah.
It was. I think it was made for some world exhibition in Paris or something. It's a wooden flute.
Oh,
and it's a marvelous instrument. But as Tammy was saying, because of the way it's tuned, he has this tremendous limitation on the ability to play it, because you can't play it with anybody unless he's playing with a guitar. Then it's really been fun to play with him.
Harpsichord too, but I don't think the music department has a harpsichord, which
I don't know. But anyway, so that's great. I like I'm from Central Washington, so I really like the weather here, the the Four Seasons. The cycling here in Ellensburg is great. We love cross country skiing in the winter. Going mushrooming or whatever around here.
There's
nice.
There's abundance in this area.
Yeah.
All right. So one of the questions I always ask, and this is getting into so I talk to a lot of people from Ellensburg, so this is going to be really interesting because when I talk to somebody from, let's say, Soap Lake, I'll ask them this question, and I won't know the answer because I don't know Soap Lake well enough at all to have an answer. Here I have some ideas, but I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask you both to answer it separately. I'm coming into town, it's lunchtime, and I need to get food. Where's a great place for me to get lunch in Ellensburg?
Well, if you go to the Dakota Cafe, very nice. You can go across the street and go to Gallery 1 and see some art at the same time.
Okay. We got the Dakota Cafe. No one's mentioned that as a spot. Okay. And what do you got for me?
For lunch, I think, again, they're in that same area. You have there's Ellensburg pasta, which is nice. And there's also
The Pearl.
Right. Yes. It used to be called the Starlight.
And we heard
Pearl
that
there.
it was a cab driver who won the lottery who used to own that restaurant. Did you heard that?
I have not heard that story.
I think that's a cool story because, it's a cool space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what would you do if you won the lottery? Would you open a restaurant?
No. As much as I like to eat, I don't think
Sounds like a lot of work, but I just love it.
How do you make a large fortune, a small fortune? Opening a restaurant's probably a good way of doing that. Okay, so another question I have is I absolutely love coffee, and I drink coffee wherever I go. Where's a great place for me to get coffee in Ellensburg?
Yeah. The obvious one is D&M.
Yeah.
But you could come to my place.
Your place?
I like to make coffee.
Yeah, okay. But D&M is very solid. Very solid.
Absolutely.
Very solid.
Yes.
They do a nice job. Okay.
Yes.
All
and
right.
there used to be a place called Country Crow that was roasting coffee beans here.
Yeah, I've never heard of them.
I think they don't do that anymore because...
Okay. All right.
Just how much money you make for roasting coffee, I think is...
Once again, how do you make a
you
large fortune of a small?
Love it. Exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah. No, and when I was working in Seattle, I was talking to a friend, and she had gone on a home visit to someone from Ethiopia, and she said, "Would you like some coffee?" So she got out her iron pan
Did the ceremony
and started roasting the beans.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so yes.
There's a coffee shop in Renton called Boon Boona.
Okay.
And they roast and import African beans only, primarily Ethiopian.
Okay.
And you can go... Well, I knew about this pre-pandemic. Okay. I haven't been...
We hope they're still in business.
No, they're still in business.
Oh,
I know they're still in business.
Good.
I've been in there once post-pandemic. I don't know that they're doing this. But pre-pandemic, on Saturdays, they were doing the Ethiopian coffee ceremony that you could reserve a spot for. And it's like an hour and a half. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, we did go to an Ethiopian restaurant one time, and you just share.
Right.
We had a friend who she worked in Qatar, Quatar.
Oh, okay.
We call it
Qatar.
Sometimes I've heard it Qatar, but she called it Qatar, and
Okay.
she's been there, so I was like, well, I think I won't correct you.
Okay.
So she taught chemistry there, and one night we had, we were having retro cocktail hour parties. I don't know if you know that radio show, but it's pretty fun. Anyway, so we had an Arabian theme night, and she came over, and we had all jalabas, and she was pouring cardamom flavored coffee for everyone. These little tiny cups. It was fantastic.
Okay, that would be fun.
Mm-hmm.
That would be fun. All right. So the last question I have for you. Do you remember? Is it ringing any bells? Okay. Okay. Cake or pie?
Oh.
And why?
This reminds me of this question, this friend of mine from grad school asked. And
Right.
I'm speaking with him, and he looks at me and he goes, Neil, people say that you can't compare apples and oranges, but which one is better? And I look at him with this dumbfounded look on my face. I don't know, Steve. And he just is so disappointed in me. And he goes, apples, Neil, apples. I always think of that. One of the funniest things anybody ever said to me was that.
I guess that's appropriate for Washington
Appropriate
State,
for Washington.
isn't it?
All right, so you sidestepped the question, Neil.
That's a very clear answer for Neil.
Cake or pie, and why?
Pie, because one of my two favorite desserts is pumpkin pie, and so I would say pie because
Okay.
I just love pumpkin pie.
All right, pumpkin pie.
And I'm going to say cake just to be different. And I do love, what is that one with the chocolate cake with cherries, whipped cream?
I'm drawing a blank.
It's not the German chocolate cake with the nuts. It's the one that's Black Forest.
Black Forest. Okay.
That's it. Yeah,
All
that's
right.
pretty delicious.
All right. So we got cake and we've got pie. Okay. We got both. All right. Where can people find out about you online? And because you're going to be doing more performances than just the one on the 20th, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You guys play regularly.
Yeah.
Primarily here in Ellensburg now, or are you doing any stuff in the Northwest?
Around, I think we may be playing in the Tri-Cities coming up. We get
21st,
concerts now and again.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where can people find out more about you?
At our
Cawkins Guitar Duo.
.com.
I'll put that.
So CAULKINS.
Okay. I'll put that in the show notes for people to click
Super.
on it. Okay. Thank you both.
Hope you enjoyed the show. You can reach me on Twitter at ExploreWaState. I'd love to hear your comments. You can also visit our website at explorewashingtonstate.com. If you know anyone who would like the show, it'd be amazing if you'd share the show with them. This is the biggest way that we grow this show. Good old word of mouth. Glad you were here with me today, and I hope to have you listening to the next episode. See you then.